We made it. We're here. Happy New Year. Woohoo! If you don't know, we've been doing this whole lectionary thing for a long time, and then, last 8 weeks we've been doing Job, which was not really lectionary. But in the lectionary, the Christian New Year is Advent. So it kind of lines up with the New Year, but if you're a person like me and you have to go in every single week to see what the lectionary text is going to be like, and you go in and you go year B, which is what we've been on, year B as in boy, and you click year B for Advent, you're going to have last year's Advent stuff because now we are in year C. And why is this important? It's important that we talk in terms of new days or new beginnings, because unlike many places in the world, the church is a place that begins in anticipation. We don't begin when the new year comes, when Jesus is born. We begin before that. We begin with 4 words, with 4 Sundays: hope, peace, joy, and love. Or hope, I think it's hope, peace, love, and joy. I forget which order it is. I'll get it right when we get there, but it's only week 1, so you can still forgive me, especially with like the crooked candles. But we brought out all the fire, because this year we need hope. We need it, perhaps more than ever before. And so if you have ever been to Hope before, you know that I'm probably going to tell you about context and lots of things about the text. So let me do that briefly, because I think that this word this morning, as a New Year's message, is more important this year than perhaps ever before. I think this is massively important. And I was convicted of this on Friday night when we gathered, just a couple of us gathered because it was the holidays, for our Subversive Witness small group, and it was just reiterated to me, no. This is the moment. This is the moment that we need hope more than ever. So let me give you a little bit of context. So our text this morning, our 2 texts come from the end of the Gospel of Luke, which is a little weird because the Gospel of Luke, obviously, the story of Jesus, and Jesus isn't born yet, but on the first Sunday of Advent, we read something that Jesus said at the end of his ministry. It's kind of weird, but churches are weird places, and part of the issue is that we've tried to make churches into not weird places, but that's a whole nother message for another time. So church is a weird place, so we're talking about number 1, Jesus is talking about the end times here in Luke 21, and then also we go back to the Old Testament, Jeremiah 33, and that's the one that I want to give you the context for. So if we're thinking about Jeremiah 33, what Jeremiah says here is he says, hey, look, there is coming a time when the covenant that's been made to David, the promise that's been made to David, will be revealed. It will be fulfilled. But that time is not yet come right now. And this was a radical idea at the time. Because if you remember, we went through David. David was part of lectionary year B. This is one of the reasons why I love lectionary. They picked the texts that fit with the stuff that we've been talking about all year. And so lectionary year B, you get David and his whole story. And God makes David this promise. He says, your throne will be forever. And the problem is that doesn't happen the way that everyone expects it to happen. So when the people of Israel, they kind of continually go down these dark paths. They oppress the poor. They don't take care for the widows. They marginalize women. They don't do what they're supposed to with the Levitical law as it relates to economic justice or any of these things. They screw up over and over and over. And eventually they are captured, taken over by Babylon. And that is one of the most horrible experiences for any community to go through. And we actually have an entire book of the Bible called Lamentations that's all about how terrible it was when they were taken over by Babylon. I mean, they resort to all sorts of terrible things. They're starved out and they have to start cannibalism. It's terrible. And so imagine that Jeremiah is predicting, he's seeing all of these things happen. He sees the threat of Babylon coming into Israel, and all of the leaders of Israel are like, no. We don't have anything to worry about. We don't have anything to worry about because of the Davidic covenant, because God promised that David's throne would never cease. And Jeremiah's like, no, I don't think that was the promise. I think that the promise was that David's throne would reign forever. but that it wouldn't necessarily reign forever in a continuous line, that David's throne would never be put out, that someday David's throne would be forever. And so this is the context of this. Jeremiah is speaking to a group of people who are dejected. They're heartbroken. Their promise that they were going to be on top of the world forever has just been broken. The Babylonians are coming into their city. It's horrible. They're being starved out in the city. Everything is bad. And Jeremiah speaks a word of hope. It's the whole book of Jeremiah is really tough read. But there's this little book of hope in the middle. And this comes from that, where Jeremiah says, no. There will still be a branch. Just a little light. One of the reasons that I set up the sanctuary this way, and props to Lisa for brand new tree. It's not brand new, but it's brand new to us. New tree, all this beautiful Advent decorations that people set up last week. Lisa was leading the charge. But one of the reasons why I wanted to put the Advent wreath over here this year was because I wanted to give us the perception that all of the lights are over there, but you can see, sorry, pink candle, you can see just how little this light is in this kind of dark corner. But it still shines. It still holds on. And so I want this to be a message for us this morning. I want it to be a message for us this morning in a different way, in a different time than what Jeremiah was going through, in a different time than what Jesus was going through. Because remember, right after this, Jesus, it's not all cupcakes and flowers for Jesus either. We talk about that at Lenten and Easter, but Jesus doesn't make it to the end of his life without being killed by the state and by the religious authorities of the day. Jesus has to speak the hope too. And one of the things that Jesus says, and I'm just going to touch on this really briefly, because I know if you're like me and you listen to the whole text from Jesus' kind of apocalyptic rant in chapter 21, if you listen to that text, maybe you just didn't hear any of it. But one of the things that always sticks out to me in that text is that Jesus says, this generation will not die out before these things come to pass. So he's talking about, the world's going to pass away. There's going to be this great apocalyptic event. The the temple's going to be torn down. All these terrible things are going to happen. And he says, and it's going to happen really soon. And one of the things that I want to just point out here is that didn't happen. But I think that it was an intentional choice by Jesus to make the statement anyway. I don't think that Jesus really thought in that moment, okay, this is for sure going to happen in the lifetime of the people who are here. What he's saying, like what Jeremiah was saying, is, hey, look, there are going to be hard things. There are going to be setbacks. There are going to be difficult times for you, for anyone, for all of you, all of my followers. There's going to be difficult moments. And so every generation is intended to feel as though in their lifetime, the world will end. In their lifetime, everything will fall to pieces. Every generation is intended to feel this way. And by the way, every generation has. If you go back, it's kind of funny, but if you go back 100 years, they thought the world was going to end. You go back 20 years of Y2K, you guys remember that? People stocking them on bottled water. We can laugh now, but we were so serious about Y2K, guys. We were but I didn't take it seriously. You took it seriously. You thought the computers were going to all shut down, right? This is the real world that we live in. 2012, the end of the Mayan calendar, people freaking out, right? We always feel like the world's going to end because it always seems like the world is getting darker. And we always go, oh, Jesus, he said this is going to happen in my lifetime. So it's intentional. So let's talk about it. Let's go to the next slide. Let's talk about it. These days are dark. Let's just name it. Because, like I said, we're at the beginning of Advent, message on hope, which is an important message because, we're named after this principle, this concept of hope. But in order to understand the first Sunday of Advent, we have to understand that the days are dark. So this is why I love that they placed Advent where they did in the seasons. because in the northern hemisphere, these are the darkest days. It feels this way. The days are dark. We have just one little spark of hope. And so what do I mean by this? Well, as we enter 2022, we are experiencing a near unprecedented time for the Western Church. We got a lot of people here this morning. I mean, it's the beginning of Advent, so it's like a thing. You got to come back to church at Advent. It's going to be good. We're going to sing Christmas songs. But this is a near unprecedented time for the Western Church. Church attendance, all-time low right now. All-time low. Maybe we deserve it. Maybe we haven't been very good. Maybe, you know what, like we needed to be told, hey, guys, you got to get back on track. But church attendance in the Western world, all-time low. We got more people in this country than we've ever had before, and the fewest number of them go to church. It's wild. It's wild. The pandemic, you want to talk about like the church was already struggling, and then you guys like just stayed home for a year, and like probably 20, I'm not talking about the people who are online who are like, hey, I have a health condition, I can't be here, you're here every week, don't hear me, I'm not calling you out. But there are like at least 10 people that I know who, from Hope, and I'm not trying to call them out individually, but who just were like, I mean, I didn't go to church for a year, and it just like isn't a habit anymore. I just don't wake up on Sunday morning thinking that that's what I'm going to do because I didn't do it. So church attendance was already bad, and then, man, we did that. The world that you live in is more divided than ever. I feel like every year I say at the new year, the world's more divided than ever. And then the next year, what happens? We get more divided. In the last 3 years, just remember this. Think about this for a moment. We've had our eyes opened to some of the greatest societal sins that we could ever imagine. I was just thinking about watching that 1980s movie that just came out, 8-Bit, with Neil Patrick Harris. And I was thinking about how in the late 80s, when I wasn't yet born, I just had to do it. I always have to do it, guys. I'm going to be 30 in like a week, and then I'm going to feel like, okay. In the late 80s, we thought things were like coming to a point where sometime in the mid-90s, we were going to reach the pinnacle of human society. Remember that movie, The Matrix, 1999? You know what that movie's about? How we reached the pinnacle of human society. They were wrong. The Wachowskis were wrong. We're going backwards. The last 3 years, we've had our eyes open to some of the most societal ills that we could ever imagine. Number one, we've had, this goes back more than 3 years. This goes back probably 8 years at least. But the Black Lives Matter movement last summer opened our eyes to some of the most gross injustices that we experience in society. Whether you want to own those or not, whether you want to believe them or not, our eyes are being opened to those injustices. Mass incarceration is now a hot topic. 10 years ago, nobody cared. You know what? We should have cared. But our eyes are being opened to it. The Me Too movement is opening our eyes, has opened our eyes in the last 3 years to some of the grossest abuses that have existed in our society. And you know what else movement? The Church Too movement. Because you know who covers up sexual assault more than anybody? The church. We're in trouble here, folks. Immigration. I remember all the talk about immigration, cages at the border. All of a sudden, this became an issue when it was always an issue, but now our eyes are being opened to it. The church as a whole is fragmenting. Every single month, I read about a new denomination that is going through the LGBTQ inclusion question. And instead of waging into that question, pushing forward into that question, asking the hard exegetical questions about what the Bible says about same-sex relationships and the divine image in persons, whether or not we agree with lifestyle choices or anything. Before ever doing that, you know what churches do? They're just like, nope, boom, you're gone. We disagree with you. We'd rather not talk to you. We'd rather not deal with you. This is the world that the Hope Light comes into. You're like, John, I came here, it's Christmas, stop talking about these things. If you're like, blah, 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 yeah, me too. Me too. But here's the thing, we can get through it. We can. And not only can we get through it, we can get our world through it. Christianity is uniquely placed if the church stops being an impediment to these things and starts being an advocate for the world, an advocate for the way of Jesus. The church is uniquely placed because we start our new year with hope. We don't start our new year with conclusion. We don't start our new year with, oh, on this day, everything's been fixed, and now we have a new world to live in. We start our new year in Jeremiah, right before a genocide, right before the city is sacked. We start our new year right before the cross with Jesus. We start our new year in the darkest moments, and we light a candle for hope in the midst of it. And so here's the thing. You guys, all of you, each and every one of you who's here today, you get to embody hope, not just the name of your church, but the biblical and theological principle of hope, and be a light unto the world. You can do it. You can actually be the hero of this story. I can't. Because you know who the world doesn't listen to? People with degrees and masters of divinity. Our stock is pretty low right now. Right? I saw some guy with a mullet on TikTok just firing off his mouth the other day. Looked super hip, minus the mullet. But I realized that that's what I have to compete with. But you know what you have to compete with? Nothing. You're just a person. You can go back into whatever community you're a part of. Whether you're an executive director of a nonprofit, whether you work at a gym, whether you are an attorney, whether you're an educator at the at the collegiate level or at the kindergarten level. You guys get to go back out into the world, and you guys get to be the hope. I'm here to help you get there. I'm here to try and guide you to that. But I'm not the one who's going to do this. You're going to do this. And so go to the next slide. This is what I want you to get today. This is what I believe my definition of hope is. Hope is an active belief in God's redemptive plan for the world. And I'm going to add to the after active belief and therefore participation. Hope is an active belief and therefore participation in God's redemptive plan for the world. And this is what I want you to take away this morning. That when Jeremiah said what he said, when Jesus said what he said, when we say what we say in our dark days, when our world is more divided than ever, when our Facebook feed looks like World War, Civil War II, right? When all of that's happening, we get to be the participants in God's redemptive plan for the world. And here's the truth that I believe, whether you believe it or not. God's going to redeem the world. This too shall pass. There's nothing new under the sun. What Jeremiah went through was way worse than what we're going through. What Jesus went through, way worse than what we're going through. Probably what our grandparents went through, way worse than what we're going through. Black Lives Matter movement, yes, very real concerns. Compared to the civil rights movement, y'all got it easy. Right? We've been through this before. So God's going to redeem the world. He has a redemptive plan for the world that is going to be carried out. It's whether you want to be a participant in it or not. Whether you want to have a front row seat to it or not. That's the question. Will the church be God's redemptive plan for the world, or will God have to pick somebody else to carry the torch for us? That's the question that we all have to answer this morning. This holiday season. We need a plan to do better than we've done. Because as I look around, I realize that as the church has become more mainstream and gotten less weird, our message has become less convicting. It's become less self-sacrificial. It's actually just become so void of all meaning that any meaning we want can be placed into the vessel of the church, and it can be used for whatever ends we want. It's why we can, as a society, support things that are anti-gospel from the pulpit. And everyone goes, nods along. Because as the church has gotten less weird, as the church has gotten less about that little light of hope, as the church has gotten less convicting, the church has become void of meaning, and we can put whatever we want. We can put nationalism in there, and you know what? Package that up and sell that. We can put prosperity and getting up on top, and you if you pray this way, if you give this way, you're going to get. You can just package that up, sell that. Gnosticism, you sell that. Anti-biblical rhetoric, sell that. But we have hope. We need a plan. So here's my plan. You can go back to the hope slide, first one. I'm going to give you an actionable thing to do this week. And I'm going to try to do this every single week of Advent because it's the Christmas season and y'all want something to do, so I'm just trying to give you something to do. Number one, I want you to pick a person in your life. I don't have slides for this, so you just got to write it down or think about it. I want you to pick a person in your life who you do not know well, but you do know. So I'm giving you a bounded set here. Your Uncle Ricky, who you argue with every Thanksgiving, not that person. You know him well. Okay? The person at Walmart who you've never met, you don't know them. They don't fit. Someone in the middle. I like to think of the person as this person. Okay? When I walk down the street and I go, that's that person. You know that person who you kind of know because you know what their dog looks like? That's the person. Someone who you have regular contact with. Someone who lives on your floor if you live in a dorm. Someone who lives on your street or lives in your apartment complex. Someone who works with you, but maybe doesn't work with you, but works near you. Someone who's got kids, your kid's age. And you see them at stuff, and you know them, but you don't know. Pick that person. Got a person in your mind yet? If you don't, that's okay, but think about it. If you do, if you already have a person, picture them for the whole, this will make it much easier. Number 2, think about a way that you could make their life better. Here's the kicker on this one. Making them a Christian does not count. You weren't ready for that one. Making them a Christian does not count. Because the truth is, I don't even know if that makes people's life better all the time today. Give you some examples. I want you to give them a compliment. A real compliment. Not, I like your coat. But, hey, every single morning you walk past me, and I think about how I wish that I could get up and walk my dog every morning, but I just open the back door and let him out. And that takes serious resilience to do that every morning when I see you walking out here in the cold, and I think that that's awesome. I know it's a long compliment. That's a real compliment. Encourage them on something that they've done well. It's another way of giving somebody a compliment. So somebody at work, they gave a great presentation. You know what happens after somebody gives a great presentation at work? Everyone goes back to doing whatever they were doing. They work for 40 hours away from their kids. They haven't seen their kids in a week, so they can put together this PowerPoint. And nobody cared. But you can care. Hey, Phil, you did a great job on that presentation. Seriously. I felt like I didn't know anything about this, and now I know something about it. Thank you for doing that. You don't like complimenting people? That's fine. Some people don't like it. It's very anti-Scandinavian. We don't compliment people. So do the Scandinavian version of this. Ask this person how they are. And, if you ask them enough times, it might take you a whole month to get here. But if you ask somebody enough times how they are, they'll really tell you one of the times. Yeah, it's really hard because I don't love my job right now, but got to do it. Yeah, this happened to my wife the day before Thanksgiving. I was having a fine day until I parked in a legal parking space, and then I was towed anyway. and I had to take an Uber to my next job because the city of Chicago has a racket of stealing cars, because it's stealing when they take your car when they're not supposed to. And they stealing cars and then charging you to get them back. And then the next time that you see that person, ask them about that thing. Hey, did you ever get your car back? Oh man, I'm so glad that you did. And you might think, oh, well, that doesn't really matter. I wouldn't care if somebody did that to me. You know what 90% of people report is their problem in life? That they're lonely. 90% of our culture is lonely. 90%. You know why? Because this is not a way to have personal connection. We're more connected than ever, and yet we're less connected than ever. 90% of people are lonely. So you know why asking somebody about their life and then repeating back to them that you were listening matters? Because it's a real connection. So it's number 2. Find somebody who you know, but you don't know. Number 2, compliment them, do something like that, or ask them how they are. And then monitor your interactions with those people for the rest of this year, until January 1st. Monitor your interactions with that person, and monitor your own feelings when you see that person approaching you. Not only monitor how they're interacting with you, but monitor how you feel when you see them. Because being kind to someone is good for you. And here's what this is going to do. Hope, you might think, well, what does that have to do with hope? Hope being the active participation. Yeah, we'll get there. I'm going to get there. That's a really good quote. If you're reading that instead of listening to me, I understand, because it's a really good one. Okay. Hope is the ability to not only see the world as a dark place, but to be the light in that world. And to see the light in that world. And so you might think, oh, well, how am I really giving them hope? You're being the light. When they go on Facebook, 90% of the stuff that they see, or 80% of the stuff that they see, is either verifying an opinion in them that's making them angry, or it's verifying, or it's being the opposite of an opinion in them that's making them angry. You're being a positive interaction in somebody's life. And you know what? Maybe over time, maybe 6 months down the road, 3 months down the road, maybe they'll ask you, why? And then you get to tell them, because my pastor told me to, because that's the kind of church I go to. And then you can give them evangelism. But before any of this connection, just telling them, you got to get to church, well, what church are they going to go to? And is it going to make them better or worse? We don't know. So down the road, but you get to be that hope, that light. So I'm going to end with this. We're going to sing another song, but I'm going to end with this. This is a quote by Desmond Tutu, Bishop Desmond Tutu. It says, hope is being able to see the light in spite of all of the darkness. And I like to replace the word see with be. Hope is being able to be the light in spite of all of the darkness. One of the things that the church has got to get better at, guys, is naming that we live in a dark world. Not dark because of some mystical force that's outside of our control that relieves us from culpability. Not a dark world because Jesus is coming soon and we have to wait for that to happen in order for anything to happen positively. Somebody said that in small group. That cut like a knife. How many people in our lives, how many times have we said, well, you know what? Nothing's going to get better until Jesus comes back. That's not hope. That's passive waiting, and that's different. Hope is being able to see or be the light in spite of all the darkness. Once we start naming those dark things, we can start being the light unto them. Once we start naming the loneliness that has caused so many of the anxieties and radicalization that we've experienced. You know why people are more radicalized than ever? Because they're lonelier than ever. You know who the easiest people to radicalize are? Lonely people. Once we start to address and deal with that, we get to be the hope for somebody. We get to be the hope in somebody's life. We get to be the one who walks down the street, and when they see you, they know. That's the guy who always says, hello, how are you? Or tells me that I'm doing a good job. People will look forward to going to work when they know you're going to be there, and they will lament when you're not. Hope is being able to see the light in spite of all of the darkness. And that is why Christianity begins in Advent with hope. I should have began with all the lights off and just one little light. Let's pray.